Talk Show. Recorded live.
Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror, movies, and awesomeness. This week we continue our retrospective that we're calling Zombie Origins with the amazing I Walked with a Zombie, directed by Jacques Tourneur and produced by the amazing Lewton. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have. So warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, author of The Iron Thane, an epic in the world of Shakespeare's Macbeth, available now in Kindle and paperback. With me from Austin is Tony Salvaggio, lead singer of the band Deserts of Mars and co-creator of the comic Psychon from Tokyopop, and Clockworks from Humanoid. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Howdy. Also in Austin is Mr. Drew Edwards, writer for Rockabilly Online and HorrorMovies.net, and creator and writer of the long-running comic Halloween Man. Say hello, Mr. Drew.
For the purposes of this evening, I want to let everybody know, for undisclosed reasons, I am coming to you live from outside of the Pflugerville, Texas Police Department in a creepy, rickety old van.
Nice. All right,
this is actually not your first time recording from a van.
But is it your first time recording from a police station?
This is like I have like a serial. I'm in a serial killer van tonight. Like this has got like tinted windows, like some odd stains that may or may not be rust. Like you wouldn't be surprised to see Dexter Morgan driving this van.
It would be so strange.
Outside of the police department.
Like if all this is a cover and you're actually, like you're on a stakeout right now and you're also recording a podcast while you do that.
But again,
that's shoddy police work.
I think the fact that he's outside the police department is the most entertaining part of the story.
Yeah. And finally, also in Denver, as always, color commentary. You heard some of it from attorney Joya Guzman. Say hello.
Hello.
Hello. Okay, according to Wikipedia, I Walked with a Zombie is a 1943. So last week we did 1932, and now we've made it into the 40s. I Walked with a Zombie is a 1943 horror film directed by Jacques Tourneur. It was the second horror film from producer Lewton for RKO Pictures, and it is many people recognize it as really an adaptation of Jane Eyre. And so I would love to hear what you guys think about this film. Let's go, which order did we do it last week? Let's do...
I think it's my turn to go first.
Is it? Well, I mean, but then you've got three male voices in a row.
So I never get to go first ever again unless Jamie's on it?
You have an opening act.
That's wrong. No, somehow this seems unfair.
Julia goes first.
I think it's sexist.
Julia goes first. There you go.
All right.
The people have spoken.
I'm down with that. T Misery has spoken. Let's hear Joya. Let's do Joya, Tony, Drew, and then I'll go. Give us your opening thoughts. I Walked with a Zombie.
This is charming. I don't know. I'm really loving these old. Like I said, I've never been into super old movies before, but this 1943 picture is really charming. I liked it a lot. I liked it a lot better than The Witch that we saw recently, which I don't know, for some reason I felt like that was a legitimate comparison. I guess because of weird stuff, weird ritualistic things happening in the woods. But anyway, I thought it was really fun. Lots of interesting themes that I'm looking forward to exploring. I don't know. I think that's all I'd say. I shouldn't have volunteered to go first. I really didn't have anything to say. So I will say more later.
Nevertheless, going first, you did. So Drew, Mr. Drew. Oh no, it was Tony. We're going to go Tony next. Tony, I Walked with a Zombie. I don't know if you've seen this movie before. I'm curious if you have.
I had seen it. I don't even know when. A long time ago. Rewatching it, it's okay. I mean, I like this era of movies. And I think there's some great scenes in it. I think there's some great bits. But I don't know if I would watch it like a lot. But it's pretty solid, and it's a cool period piece. And, it's another one of those, like, hey, look, it's a bunch of, like, really privileged white people. How do we deal with the people in town? I don't know. Those moments, like, again, it's of a time, it'd be interesting to see some more of these kind of remade with, maybe a little bit more
bite to them on exactly what was going on. But I don't know if that'd make it better, but I dig the movie. It's just not like a super favorite of mine, but it's cool.
Well, thank you. Drew, what are your thoughts?
Well, I kind of fall in line with Tony. When I was a kid, I've been into black and white horror movies more or less my entire life. And when I was a kid, though, I didn't really have an appreciation of the Val Lewton films. I always felt like they were a ripoff because they didn't have monsters in them like the Universal movies did. As an adult, I've come around to see how they kind of created this whole genre of sort of slow burn, very subtle, atmospheric horror films. And, I've come to appreciate them more. Although I will say, I think despite Val Lewton's open distaste for the stuff that Universal did in their horror films, I think with this one, he completely by accident created a monster movie.
Yeah.
I'm curious.
I'm totally with you on all points there.
Yeah.
Like, everything you just said, I'm with you.
So how do I want to get into this now, or do you want to save it for during the show? I'm curious what makes this. Give me.
We can save it for during the show.
Okay. All right. For my part, what I find fascinating about this is actually one of my favorite films. I love this movie. I could have this movie on just a constant loop. This is a movie I discovered many years before I actually got to see it, because Danny Peary wrote about it very lovingly in his first book on cult movies, and that was a book that I just poured over and over and over again. And I've always been hung up on Gothic romance, and this is definitely Gothic romance. The other strange thing is, for years I was obsessed with it, but it was very hard to get. And here's the crazy thing. As recently as like 8 years ago, I remember I said to Julia, you know what I want for my birthday? I want a copy of I Walk with a Zombie. And the only one we could find was a bootleg. And now, like today, not only can I find it on Blu-ray, not only can I find it rentable on like numerous things like Amazon Prime and what have you, but I just hit the search on my DVR and it was just playing on TCM like in a couple of days. So it has gone from being a movie that's very obscure and difficult to get your hands on to being a movie that can be had at any moment. So that's not really just an effect of I Walk with a Zombie. It's just the amazing change that has happened in our ability to get legitimate sources of films just very at a moment's notice. That it just didn't used to be, and it's amazing. People growing up today will never know of the time of famine that we grew up in. So anyway, all of that said, I love this movie. I love the style of it, and I can't wait to discuss it. And I hate to like tilt things so much in my sort of cheerleader favor, but yeah, I dig this a lot. So all right.
Can I say one other thing before we get into the meat of this?
Yeah,
the one thing I always associate with this movie, and I'm sure Tony probably is a music guy, is probably in the same boat, is the Rocky Erickson song I Walked with a Zombie,
Absolutely.
which is essentially I walked with a zombie, I walked with a zombie, I walked with a zombie last night, over and over and over again with this sort of doo-wop beat to it. It's a great song. But that may be, my favorite thing that I associate with this movie, even more so than this movie, the movie itself.
I think I'm with you there too. I think we're lockstep so far.
Simpatico.
Yep.
All right. So this movie opens up, with an opening that I think is so perfect for copying, because this movie I think clearly defines itself as a Gothic romance right up front, and we'll get into this a little bit, but basically the deal is we open just like at the beginning of The Ghost of Mrs. Muir. In this case, with somebody in some authoritarian, fastidious little office. In this case, we have a nurse played by Betsy Connell, and she's taken a job to go into the West Indies to be the private nurse for this wealthy family, and and that's dispensed with really quickly, and we immediately find her on a ship. Now,
first you have to mention that it opens with the line, "I walked with a zombie."
Yes, no, it does.
It says that.
So I'm not even going to get into the ship. I just wanted to mention this notion we opening up, with the woman who is going to take a job, and it's going to take her on an adventure. The way this is done is very much in keeping with the Gothic romance, something like Jane Eyre, which Val Lewton said he wanted this movie to be based on, where somebody, usually an orphan or a woman of very sort of desperate means, but nevertheless educated, finds herself wanting a job, and she takes one in a faraway place to go join a great house. So there's always that feeling of great anticipation and kind of giddiness of the adventure. Jane Eyre opens like this. Like I said, Ghost and Mrs. Muir opens that way. Dark Shadows opens this way. If you look at Dark Shadows, the first episode of Dark Shadows opens with Victoria in the office of the orphanage that she grew up in, and they're like, "Hey, this big old family up in Maine needs a governess." This is how you send a woman on an adventure in a Gothic romance, and I thought it was kind of cool. But does anybody know? And if I could not find this anywhere, but does anybody know where this movie was filmed? Because I don't have any data on that. I presume it's not really the West Indies.
It looks like it's on some studio backlot. I'm not enough of a RKO scholar to pinpoint it, but
so this might turn out to be a stupid question, but does RKO just have a nice backlot? I mean, this backlot looks like, it would fit in with a Tarzan picture or a Jungle Gym or anywhere where great white explorers would be hanging out in.
I mean, most studios had something, so it wouldn't be outside the realm to think that they, that's the deal.
I guess that has to be. This has to be a backlot, but it's really cool. I mean, it to me, this is what Hollywood adventure, should look like, with especially when you get to, the palm trees, and they summon the vision of palm trees.
Yeah, RKO has something called the RKO 40 Acres.
Right.
Owned first by RKO and then later Desilu Productions in Culver City, California.
Yeah. So absolutely, that's definitely what we're looking at here. We're looking at because when you look at this, the town, the little town, and this imaginary West Indian country, it looks like a place where Indiana Jones might stop in.
Yeah, well, they used it for King Kong, for Gone with the Wind.
Yeah. So there we go.
Mm-hmm. Also, wasn't it in Most Dangerous Game as well?
So that's probably, now that I think about it.
Most Dangerous Game, is that what you said?
Yeah, Most Dangerous Game. It's where the rich guy.
Yeah. I'm looking at the Wikipedia, and it's in there. Yeah.
So the first thing that we come. I'm sorry.
Although it does not mention I Walk with a Zombie in the Wikipedia list, but whatever.
We could do some more research on that. But you could. I know this is a backlight. I know this is movie magic that I'm seeing, but that's to me that's part of the charm of it. The world that she enters is exactly like Tony said, is so darn perfect. It's this, beautiful sugar plantation with all the palm trees and the awesome, there's a beach that you can walk along, and you can picture yourself in 1943 just sort of escaping into this vision of, taking a job and going to a faraway place. This is really this is the kind of thing that, to me, that just makes Hollywood, real Hollywood. Okay, so anyway, Choya, because I know that you love discussing the relationships, can you explain, do you want to talk about the first appearance of Mr. Holland?
I'm already laughing because so she's on this ship, this boat, and she's looking around and she's thinking to herself, gosh, it sure is beautiful here. And Mr. Holland says, it's not beautiful. She's like, what? She's like, you read my mind. Because, I don't remember exactly what he says, but he's basically like, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking everything's all great and everything, but it's all horrible. And he's so bitter and angry and dark. He's like, just everything. He's like, the fluorescence of the sea is like things are decaying, and the reason that the fish are jumping is because they're running away from certain death and all this stuff. He's super dark. And then, of course, Jason says, as he's saying all this, and then Jason goes, somehow I'm so attracted to you. And sure enough, she goes, she goes, even though he was like, dark
cruel.
And morbid, I liked him.
Cruel.
Yeah, he was cruel. She goes, there was something about him that I liked. I'm like, of course you did. Because
I bet I can change this man. I bet I can change this man.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. It's like I know maybe it's just me, but I see this theme in everything we watch pretty much almost, is these codependent characters, usually women, but sometimes not, codependent characters who are like, this guy is dark and brooding and I must change him, I must fix him, I'll be the savior or whatever. And of course, like I say, I resonate with that. So I'm like, that's in everything. But for sure that's the case here, absolutely.
The mention of the word cruelty is one of the things that sort of gives it away, because cruel is one of those words that is used in Gothic romance usually to describe the man that the heroine falls in love with but is determined to bring happiness to. And one of the things that he always is, because of his great pain, is cruel to everyone around him. Mm-hmm. And that's, like I said, I mentioned Jane Eyre. So Jane comes to that house and meets Rochester, and Rochester is an asshole to her. Rebecca, the governess, comes to the house, or she's not even a governess. She's just there to. I can't remember why she comes to Manderley, but she meets Mr. De Winter, and he's cruel, but she's going to. This is just the nature of Gothic romance stories, and the only thing that saves it from being unwatchable is that, we've got a good director here and also a very interesting place, with going into the West Indies and being exposed to the sugar plantations. And this is actually where it starts to be very different from anything we've ever seen. And Tony, you were talking about the racial undertones.
Not so much undertones.
Well, okay.
They're pretty overtones.
I should say the racial storyline.
Yeah.
Because there is, right up front, one of the first things that happens is she's being driven. This movie is almost aware of the racism of this world, because the movie, she's being driven out, and the driver goes something like, he tells her about this statue of T. Misery, which is a St. Sebastian statue that'll become important later. But he says, that statue was in front of the ship that brought the first mothers and the first fathers to this island, chained to the bottom of the boat. Julia, do you remember what
she goes,
Yeah.
She goes, but what a beautiful place they brought you to. And he's like, you say so. Yeah. I don't remember exactly what his line is, but it's been like, whatever you say, lady.
Yeah, he's like, okay, we're having this conversation. You're right. I'm the luckiest man alive. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry to inconvenience you with thoughts of what my people went through. You're right. I'll keep driving. Thanks.
It's really amazing to see the race relations in a 40s movie like this, where there's a clear notion that these people are suffering and live in misery. We find out in the night that they have a custom of crying dramatically when babies are born, because life is misery, and then making merry and having a party when you die for the same reason. So life is misery, but at the same time, there's clearly a caste system in place, so that the white people are by their nature managerial and privileged, and the black people are servants. And except, of course, that everybody's aware of it, so there's a constant conversation going on, but nobody's attempting to overthrow it. It's just interesting to me. I don't know how you would tell this story today. I don't know. Tony asked.
I think you could probably go deeper into it.
No, that's what I was talking about. I mean, it would make you could say a lot in the same. And I think the cool thing is, I think a lot of these movies actually were saying as much as you could possibly at the time, in a lot of ways. And so this idea of kind of some social justice or some, agent of like bringing things up through horror, through sci-fi, you get that a lot because you can abstract it from that. I think it's really interesting, those are these lower brow movies. We're not, people maybe aren't going to look at it in the same way. And then, they're able to put things out there like that. I think that's really interesting, but I think you could redo it with, even more, although at that point, is it too self-aware? I'm not sure. But
this movie's pretty daring for its time. I mean,
no, I agree.
And you're absolutely right because they're able to deflect. It's like, oh, we're not actually talking about racism. We're talking about voodoo. Don't be silly.
Yeah.
But
exactly.
Of course, they're talking about racism.
Yeah.
Right, and about cultural differences. And you're right. If you take out the word voodoo and instead you talk about like indigenous religions and customs and things like that, for instance, Christians might not want people to continue doing, it does change the nature of it. I like, for instance, there's this character, to jump around a little bit, Sir Lancelot, the Calypso singer, is a major character in this movie, and all he does is wander around the island singing songs about the main that's how famous they are on this island, is that he has songs about them.
Well,
go ahead, Julia.
It's like those narco corridos, they're called, the songs that the Mexican guys sing about the drug lords, I think a lot of people were exposed to them in Breaking Bad, where they're singing it about.
Well, except those guys are kind of, I wouldn't say in cahoots, but they're definitely in line with it. Whereas this guy, what I love about him is he's like, hey, I'm sorry, I'm singing this song. It's about all the bad things that happened, and it's really about you, and I really can't. I didn't mean to do that. Hey, but I'm coming back.
If I knew you were here with a lady, if I knew you were here with a lady, I wouldn't have done it.
I'm just going to sing. I just can't stop singing this song about all the bad crap you do, and like
well,
how
he's almost
things
like
are.
A tabloid, like a musical version of a tabloid rag. Only it's about this.
But even when they reprimand him, he comes back. He's like, "Oh man, I can't. Am I doing that again? Am I singing about all the terrible like things that you do and that the people here do that aren't us?
Right.
Oh man, I'm so sorry. I really apologize for just keeping singing this stuff. And it's awesome. It's just like such a like, oh man, I'm just doing it again. Can't help it.
He's amazing.
It's
I mean,
great.
this guy's name is Sir Lancelot. He's Harry Belafonte was a fan, and considered him, important in Calypso history. But yeah, Tony, when you think about it, his obsession with the Holland family is similar to, like Drew, you were saying, the tabloids. It's like the tabloids being fascinated with the royal family. How we all live lives that are very similarly. We're all in labor. We're all working on the plantation. And let's sing gossip about these rich guys.
It's like it's definitely of the kind of bardic,
Yes.
Like, and it reminds me, it's like Holy Grail, where he's singing about, brave Sir Robinson running away. And he's just like, hey, sorry. Am I saying more bad things? Oh, man, that's terrible. I guess maybe you guys should not do terrible things or have bad things happen to you. Maybe you shouldn't subjugate us. But, here's some music. Enjoy. It's awesome.
Well, no,
I love that part so much.
After he's like unconscious, the brother's unconscious. Like, she's just sitting there, and he comes back, and now he's added a verse about her, and she's like, "Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up!"
Yeah, because he's sort of
he's targeting me.
Towards her.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Playing
awesome.
the flute.
I love. Yeah. I love that character, and he is a really good singer. Like, it's really cool.
Yeah.
It's just, it comes out kind of out of the blue. Like, at first, when they're saying like, "Hey, man, maybe you shouldn't do this," Say, oh no, I've got it. It's fine. Oh man, how it all plays out is just great.
When he does walk towards her at the end with the new verse, that is really interesting because he's at that point he's become slightly more aggressive, like he's trying to send her a message. The interesting thing about this character, this nurse, when you think about it, a nurse is like something in a lot of these pictures. She is able to walk and to have a good Gothic romance, or so, if you the listener are a writer and you want to go rip off some Gothic romances and write some other stuff, this is another key ingredient. Your character needs to be able to walk like a private eye, like Sam Spade, between the classes, so that she is both a servant, because she's there in the employ of the family, but she's also able to walk among them and have a superior place over the other servants and be able to talk with some authority, which is why the maid is so comfortable doing manual labor for her, like bringing her breakfast and stuff like that, even though the nurse makes it quite clear they are both servants. There's no need actually for the maid to do anything for her at all. It's cool. She becomes.
But she likes to do it. She likes to do it.
Yeah, well, that's some. I would love to watch it with an actual maid.
You know what's weird about that is I feel like it's her. Even before she's overtly saying she has a thing for the Lord of the House, they're already kind of trying to turn her into the new mistress, the new wife.
Well, that's a good point. I didn't even think about that. Drew, thank you for that, because I was just thinking what nonsense that she'd say, "Oh, I want to do for you," but actually you're right. They think
there's definitely a racial component there, but I mean I think you can stack it up with some underlying stuff about right. Here we are, here we are bringing in this young pretty woman, the wife's got 1 foot, which we need to get in and talk about her, but the wife's got 1 foot in the grave, literally, because she's a zombie. Yeah. But it's interesting. I mean, the whole relationship between her and everybody else on this island is kind of what propels the whole movie from scene to scene.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's because she finds out early on a little bit about the relations between the family that runs the plantation and all the servants, and she makes an ally in the servant Alma, who clearly really likes her because this is a sweet girl. She's the other thing I think is interesting is that this is a Canadian girl visiting a French-inflected West Indian island, and so none of this is intended. I mean, this is a very international film. There's nothing particularly American about it, except for that it's an American movie. But they've gone out of their way to make the main character Canadian. I don't even know what that means. I just note that there's an alienness to the whole thing if you're a typical American viewer, in 1943. Okay, so very early on, she finds out that she is to take care of, like you said, the wife who she finally encounters when she wakes up in the middle of the night. She hears crying. She goes into the tower and she encounters Jessica. Jessica, the somnambulist wife.
Spoilers. She's a zombie.
She's a zombie, and I think, is that even a spoiler? I mean, even though even though she says that at the end, well, I mean, Betsy says it in the first sentence of the movie. She goes, "I walked with a zombie," and so.
Well, there's multiple zombies in this movie.
True, that's true.
But and this is why I say that Val Lewton, despite himself with this movie, made a monster movie.
Okay, lay it on. Now is your chance. This whole scene of her wandering around these ruins essentially, and then the wife is sort of lumbering at her like the mummy, or actually what we would expect a zombie to do. Actually, she's outside the fact that she's not trying to eat her. She's effectively doing what we would expect a zombie to do in any later zombie film. And she chases her around until, the husband and the brother and the servants come and, take her back to bed. But this scene's, it's a monster movie scene. And it's funny, despite the fact that Val Lewton thought what he was doing was so much more sophisticated than
than what Universal was doing at the time. Like, this has a lot of those elements, and in fact, you know, he was perfectly happy to employ Kurt Siodmak, who wrote a ton of the Universal horror movies, and in fact wrote The Wolfman, one of the most famous Universal horror films of all time.
Yes, yes. And there's a lot of similarities, by the way, between The Wolfman and this, you know, with the
absolutely.
person from far away and coming into the big house and having to meet everybody, and there's the sort of funny business with different people having different accents because of where they've been studying. There's that feel of exoticness of travel that Siodmak did really well there. Yeah, he's done a gorgeous job here. This is just
well, and I don't feel like that, you know, being a monster movie is necessarily a bad thing, personally. But you know, I know it was
just so I understand correctly. Jessica's the monster, right?
Well, Jessica and I forget the other zombie's name, but the other zombie, zombie, definitely. I mean, and he's really creepy. With his,
yeah, he's really cool. But I love the scene when they go out into the woods. And like a la Blair Witch Project or whatever, they're seeing all this voodoo stuff everywhere.
Oh yeah.
And they get to him, and he's got this light on his face, and his eyes are so big, and he's just kind of standing there.
Yeah.
But he doesn't even look at them, but he sees their little voodoo patches that are like their paths to go by.
Well, that guy the guy is so tall and so emaciated looking.
Yes. Yeah. He's amazing. This guy's name is Darby Jones. He was born in Los Angeles in 1910. So he's about 33. So he's young. He's extraordinarily skinny. He's like very, very tall. So tall and so skinny that his eyes are slightly protuberant. And you know, because there's other images of him from Hollywood where he doesn't look quite that strange. But he plays the other major zombie here. And in this case, you know, he is a zombie that does nothing but watch the four corners of a crossroads in a secret path through the sugar cane, and we'll get to that moment a little bit later. But yeah, what I think when people think of this film, mostly what instantly comes to mind is Carrefour standing in the sugar cane, and also the two women walking through the sugar cane. It's such a perfect setting. So as soon as we meet Jessica, who is a zombie, that's at the point where Betsy, our main character, gets to sort of get a feel for, this is going to be my job. I'm going to take care of this woman who is an invalid. She can be led around, and it's explained to her really quickly by the local doctor. She had a fever. It damaged her nervous system. She has, what he seems to suggest is she has no functioning brain, but you know, she can, you know, she has good musculature. She can stand up. She can walk. She can follow basic instructions. That is a straight-up zombie, whether you believe in voodoo zombies or not. And it's going to become more mysterious as you go along. It's like, what is the nature of her zombification? But that's the setup. So she's supposed to take care of her. And so that's the moment when we meet the other brother, because she goes out drinking on her night off with brother Wesley, who rather sloppily sort of gets drunk and kind of disses his brother and says, I bet you my brother has been laying that don't believe in the beauty of the world.
Yeah, that's beautiful. He uses the word beautiful.
The things he can do with that world. Yeah. You know, and so Wesley is really good at taking you know, Mr. Holland down a notch, which is good.
Rand is the other guy.
Taking Rand Holland down, and you know, which is good because, you know, somebody's got to. Otherwise, the movie would be failing us if it didn't give us somebody to comment that this guy is extremely full of himself. And it's good that this character Wesley is here.
And by the way, both of the sons, the older son, Rand, is actually, the actor is actually 2 years older than the actress who plays their mother. Makes me, and then the other one's like 3 years younger. And it makes me laugh in these old movies that for some reason they just didn't believe that older people could actually act or something, because every single thing we've watched that takes place before 1950 has a person who has is kind of oldified by putting like gray hair, by putting like some gray in their hair, and not even good gray. I think it's just like baby powder.
Well, in this case, it's not very convincing, for sure.
No, it's never convincing. None of these is convincing. They're always like 30-year-olds that have, for some reason, been made up to quote unquote to play like a 55-year-old or 60, or probably this lady's supposed to be 65. I'm guessing.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Well, we were watching Peyton Place the other day.
Yeah.
And Mike Rossi, the new principal who comes in and sort of sets the plot of that
exactly.
motion, he's got to be like 32, and they've got him basically. He looks like a high school student playing the dad in a play, because he's got all this silly sort of powder in his hair. It's I can't explain it at all. On TV it didn't bother me very much. You know, old TV, SD, grainy television sets, you don't really notice. But now that everything is so slick and no flaw can be missed, you know, you suddenly become aware, well, that woman's not very old at all. But whatever. We also meet, at the point where Wesley gets drunk, we meet the mom, and she is one of the single coolest characters ever. I totally want, because I love this woman. She's like the druggist. She's basically she's like a clinical doctor. You know, she's not a straight-up doctor, but she's doing medicine. She's acting as a missionary. There's nothing religious about her work in the slightest. Because she's the wife of a missionary. He's dead. So now all she does is basically run a clinic. She works with the doctor. She is kind of a social worker, and she has her finger in all the pies. It's really interesting, and I like this character a lot. Mrs. Holland, I suppose she's called, or Mrs. Rand, and she makes fast friends with.
No, Rand is the first name, so it'd be Mrs. Holland. Oh no,
it's Rand.
No, they. Oh wait, you're right. They had two different last names because they're.
I apologize. Yes, Paul Holland is the name of the main character, and Wesley Rand.
Okay. So I was trying to give them. Okay, yeah.
You're all good. It's all good, and the audience will forgive us. I'm sorry. It wasn't Rand Holland. It's Paul Holland. Anyway, so yes, we meet the mom, and you know, it's at about that time that there's another plot that's been going on that they've told us about, which is that the crops are very, very dry. Now, when I heard this, I was thinking, well, this is Chekhov's dry crop, so that surely there's going to be some big-ass fire that's going to come through and basically destroy everything, like in Jane Eyre, where eventually the way they take care of the crazy wife in the attic is that a fire breaks out and it kills the crazy wife and everybody's happy. I'm sorry. No, that is Jane Eyre. Also happens in Rebecca, believe it or not. So you can forgive me for thinking that there was going to be a big fire, but that doesn't happen at all. What it is the hot wind is blowing, the crops are dry, and so there's a lot of voodoo going on as the natives are wishing for their gods to bring rain. And Betsy makes an attempt to cure Jessica that doesn't work out. And we can kind of skip over it. The only useful thing about it is that when she comes up with this idea of how to cure Jessica, it makes it clear to everyone that she's really trying to help Jessica. And at the same time, she's doing it because of her intense love for her employer, and so she wants so to make him happy that she wants to be able to bring his spouse back to him. But unfortunately, this is a soap opera, so actually Mr. Holland doesn't really want his wife back because she was about to run away with Wesley. And you know, there's a lot of... and at this point, guys, are you watching this and going, wait, is this a horror movie at all, or what am I? Because to me, we are now in the land of straight up soap opera when that stuff is happening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean that's Gothic romance for you. So
yeah, I mean that's also like the Val Lewton mark is, you know, like his movies were very much, you know, character driven dramas as much as they were horror, and like the horror scenes it's a slow burn thing, like this was the start of what we call slow burn horror, because like you can go minutes upon minutes without anything scary happening. And, it builds up to, when there is something creepy, and then it's even more creepy because you're not thinking about it at that point. You've been lulled into thinking, oh, I'm watching this romantic drama, and then, oh, and wait, here's a creepy zombie. And,
well said.
As a kid, I will say, though, again, as a kid, this pissed me off. I didn't have patience for this as a kid. I wanted to see vampires and mummies and werewolves, and I wanted them to get to, I remember the first time I watched Cat People, as a kid, that movie pissed me off so much. And as an adult, I can appreciate. Huh?
Oh, good. I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
Well, as an adult, I can appreciate it for being a good film. Much as the same thing with this one. When I first saw this movie, it pissed me off. But I was too young to appreciate it. And I think, as you get older, your palate broadens and you understand certain things, and you can appreciate many types of genre films.
I was just thinking about how Cat People really, the thing that drives Cat People is mostly jealousy. If I recall, it's that the the Catwoman is jealous of the quote unquote normal woman in that case, and our sympathies are with the Catwoman, if I recall, at various times. And it swaps back and forth, which is not the case here. In this case, we almost never get into Jessica. There's no Jessica there, so we can't really be in her.
We can feel bad for her lowly state.
We sure can. Absolutely. And everybody really does want to figure out what's the kindest thing to do with Jessica. Is it to just keep dressing her up like a doll? Is it to, find, is it to cure her even though it might kill her? Is it to murder her? What's going to happen? And Betsy finally decides maybe what I should do is bring her out to the to the voodoo people, who have what's called a home fort, which is a sort of secret base where in the middle of the cane fields, where they have a little cabin and they talk to the gods.
And they dance and play drums and communicate with the great divine, whatever they believe in.
So this whole sequence of walking to the home fort and then at the home fort, this is where the movie gets really, really rich. So the walk, Julia, which you alluded to earlier, this is the thing that like Danny Peary had pictures of, and any like movie book that I got had pictures of, because Betsy sneaks Jessica out, Jessica the white zombie, as it were, and they walk, with little scarves as charms that will get them past the towering zombie Carrefour, who will stand in the crossroads. They're going to follow little clues along the way and little voodoo trinkets that are hanging from the trees and stuff, and they walk through the sugarcane, and it is just incredible.
I love the gourds with the holes through them so that it just kind of whistles. I totally want to do that because it's the creepiest sound. I love that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, and there's like a mummified fox or whatever the hell hanging from a tree. There's just all kinds of stuff that's intended to make you turn away. When we get to the home fort, and all through the movie, you can hear the voodoo drums going. You get to the home fort, and all the voodoo observers are dancing, and and chanting and doing all of this. And meanwhile, at the same time, they're lining up to whisper through the door to the person who speaks for the gods about, I guess, their wishes and their needs, their sicknesses, and the god will give them advice back. Tony, would you like to explain what happens here when we finally get all the way to the home fort to whisper through the door?
No, keep going. I'm cool.
I just didn't want to just like force people to hear my voice for like 30 minutes at a time, and I'm sorry. Okay, so we got all the way here went through this path. We followed all these signs. We've gotten to the secret place. We get all the way to the door, past the people who are dancing. And remember, all that stuff is going to be even more intimidating for a totally white audience in the early 40s. This is like way exotic stuff.
And they did. I mean, they actually, what's his name, Lewton, actually hired an expert on Haitian music and voodoo to kind of make sure that all this stuff was, kind of on the up and up a little bit.
Had a certain amount of verisimilitude. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Betsy brings the wife, Jessica, up to the door where there's, a little thing to whisper through, and she goes, I brought this woman who's very sick. And the door opens, and a hand reaches out and drags her in, and
Just her, not Jessica.
They leave Jessica out there, drag Betsy in, and yes, it is Holland's mother. Once again, the missionary / clinic leader, everything. And she goes, yes, I speak for Damballa. It's this thing I do. And she has made herself central to the religion. It is really... And
it's a totally paternalistic thing or maternalistic thing, whatever, because the idea is that she knows what's best for these people, mind you.
Yes.
And so, but they don't know because they're too ignorant and too uneducated. So she tells them, but they'll only believe it if she speaks for the God. So if they need to take, a certain medicine, or if they need to stop eating a certain thing, or if they need to boil their water, or whatever they need to do, she has to tell them as if God is, or the gods are speaking through her, because they won't do it otherwise.
Okay, so much going on there. Because on the one hand, yes, it is very paternalistic. She says, after her husband died, she goes, they wouldn't, I can't remember the word she uses, but basically they became very disobedient.
Mm-hmm.
Disobedient. She's a missionary.
Yeah.
She's not the queen. She's a missionary. But she,
she goes, sometimes it's hard to tell the difference.
I guess.
When you've got a lot of privilege, and these people just won't listen to her if she doesn't speak for God.
Yeah.
That's
but
the way.
Same, so. Yeah. Well, this happened. Look, if you read like Hawaii or any of those books about missionaries, certainly in history, this happened in Hawaii. I was researching surfing last year, and the reason surfing died is because the missionaries came to Hawaii and looked at that and go, I don't think that's godly, and they made the royals stop surfing, which I think is fascinating. That they just go, you guys shouldn't be doing that, and eventually that caught on. And it did. It died as a sport for a very long time. But at the same time, there's also a commentary here that that to some extent this is what religion does. Religion can get you to do things that are good for you, even if you can't think of any other reason to do it. That certain dietary restrictions, certain various customs could, in theory, be there, told through religion for religious reasons, but actually they're for health reasons. And so at least that's a theory, and it's a theory that's being put across here. And also, the movie is not completely certain that she's wrong. That's where it gets really complicated. Is that not for a moment are we supposed to believe necessarily that Mrs. Rand is wrong to use voodoo in order to get people to live healthier lives. So it's really complicated and very.
Then also sometimes they can still be zombies. Like
right.
if you need to use that to make things better.
There's a question as to whether she's actually a zombie or not, because they do the voodoo guys. Well, since her nurse just left her behind when she went in to talk to Mama.
Yeah.
She got stabbed, but she didn't bleed. So is she in fact a zombie? Because then later on when they do some kind of surgery on her.
If you get stabbed and you don't bleed, that's how they tell if you're a zombie or not.
Yeah, but I'm saying, why didn't she bleed? Jason's saying, well, maybe they just stabbed her in such a way that she didn't bleed. But I think you bleed if you get stabbed through like that.
Is there any technique, any way at all to stab somebody and not draw blood?
No, that much.
I don't think not without some fakery, which has been done before.
It has to be an illusion. Maybe the sword user is doing an illusion. for everybody? That doesn't make any sense.
No.
No,
I
I
don't
think
think
you need
so.
to just accept that she's a zombie and just deal with it.
Okay. But when
I
we
don't
get
think
back,
that like nowhere in the realm of this movie do they set up that this, like, they try to keep it as scientifically plausible as they can. No, in no way do they ever set up that like that's some fan wankery right there, because you're wanting to completely roll out that she's a zombie. You know, like in no way, shape, or form do they ever say, well, the sword guy is just putting on a show. And obviously these people believe that she's a zombie, including the sword dancer, because later on he's the one that's doing the voodoo doll thing to get her to go into the water.
You're right. And even if that was a little bit of Doug Henning magic, the one where he's got a little doll and he gets her to get up and start walking towards the water, that one is very difficult to explain.
Yeah, but the only thing I'm wondering is, why do they say, when they do the surgery, they say, well, she's alive, but that's it. I'm like, how do they know she's alive? Does she have a heartbeat? Because she doesn't bleed.
Yeah. No,
well, she eats.
Says, she goes, yeah, she eats, she breathes, she has a heartbeat. That's life. That's what Betsy says. You know, she goes, I can't, because Paul says, I would be in support of you euthanizing her. This woman that I loved, I would be in support of you just administering some morphine and allowing her to die, because this is no way to live. And Betsy says, I can't do that. That's against my oath. And so that's that's an argument that's going to persist to today. You know, we still have this argument over and over. I don't think
in this case it also helps if you found somebody else too.
Well, yeah, but Betsy is the one who doesn't want to do it. Wesley is
what I'm saying is, like, no, it'd be totally cool, but
Yeah. I mean, it is funny that she is so. It is. I think another way to put what you're saying is, would she come to a different conclusion if it didn't feel like incredible self-dealing? You know, the fact that she's in love with Paul, and if she could make Jessica die, then she would have Paul for herself. Does that make it less likely that she would do something to Jessica because it just seems like such dirty pool? Whereas if she were completely unbiased, maybe she would have a different opinion. By the way, I think the answer when it comes to morphine is just plumb no. I just don't think that she would do it. I think that she would probably still feel like that's just simply not something that I'm prepared to do.
Well, and, would it work? I mean, I guess we would safe to say drowning would work. I mean, she's not a Romero zombie, so she doesn't need this special way to, you don't have to.
Stabbing through the heart with a wooden stake will work, because what happens very quickly, the rest of the movie, two things happen. One, Mrs. Holland, basically the local authorities want to investigate the injuries that have been done to Jessica, like how she wound up in this zombified state. And Mrs. Holland says, all right, take me in and question me because it's my fault. And she says, I saw that my daughter-in-law was going to run off with my own son, and I was very unhappy about that. My daughter-in-law was evil and tearing the family apart. And so I cursed her. And then she fell down and has been like this ever since. And the doctor's like, well, you can curse her all you want, but she got a fever, and this is a fever you're looking at. And what winds up happening almost immediately after, that plot doesn't even have to resolve, because the sword guy, zombie guy, draws Jessica out towards the home fort. And I think they're going to continue to do some sort of ritual on her, because Carrefour is personally coming to get her. And at that point, Wesley takes a spear, a long arrow from St. Sebastian's chest and stabs Jessica to death.
Isn't that T Misery?
T Misery, yes.
Yeah, and by the way, the T is because they keep calling everybody T Misery, T Victor, T whatever. It's short for petite, because they're little, so it's just little. Yeah. Little Misery, Little Victor, little whatever the other kid's name was.
Isn't that cool? I just think that's awesome.
Yeah.
So Wesley following her, Carrefour is following them, and Wesley, as the drums are pounding, and the voodoo master drives a spear into the doll's heart, Wesley drives his arrow into Jessica's heart.
Yeah, but that's a arrow from out of a statue of a saint. That's not exactly.
Aha.
Not.
Yeah, well said.
It's kind of mystical in its way.
No, well said. Well said. Yeah, I guess you're right. I mean, I guess we have to assume that there's something mystical going on here, or
at least lightly mystical.
Yeah. Well, and as we saw in movies like Werewolf of London, there's this notion, at least in the public imagination, forget what's going on in the real scientific community, in the public imagination in this 15 years or so, the notion of science and religion are all mysterious and all just sort of mangled and mixed up. And that's just the way it is. And because remember in that one there was the magical powers of the flower that activated under the moon, but of course you can emulate the moon with a super scientific light. Just brilliant.
Well, and even in the Frankenstein movies, I mean, there's the line in Bride of Frankenstein. This isn't science. This is more like black magic. So
right.
science and science and magic in these vintage horror films are very kind of intertwined.
They're like on a continuum, really. It's like you have this long slider, and if you slide too far across the middle, you wind up in the area of black magic, and way over on the other end is your chemist guy, and then way over on the other end is somebody who has familiar ravens and
Dr. Pretorius.
Yes, exactly, making little King Henry VIII.
Yeah, maybe the greatest movie mad scientist of all time, actually.
Can I just tell you, Tony and I were working on a Universal Horror video game many years ago, and they said, we got to have this extra mad scientist who does bad stuff. And we go, oh, done. You got Dr. Pretorius. And they're like, no, kids will not know Dr. Pretorius. Make something up. And I remember Tony and I were like, make something up? Okay,
you own this.
Dr. Pretorius.
No, well, that game had so many, it was heartbreaking because I love Universal Horror so much. And when the game was working and I was animating Kid Frankenstein and Kid Dracula and Kid Wolfman, was great. But they had so much stuff where we're like, so we get a kid, Creature from the Black Lagoon, right? Well, no, you can't do that. Why? You own it. Well, just no. And so we had a creature girl, which was she was voiced really well. In some ways, it's a shame the game never shipped, but it didn't quite gel right, so it was kind of a mercy killing. Although they did make a Game Boy version of it, and some of the animation sprites looked surprisingly like animations that I did for the PlayStation game. But anyway, so we were like, yeah, but who cares? Because kids, if you just tell them it's Dr. Pretorius, it doesn't matter. The kids will find Dr. Pretorius because you'll name him that. Like, no, that would. Why would you do that?
After a certain point, it's just a name for a mad scientist. I mean, they reuse, how many movies, off the top of my head, From Beyond reused the name. You can just name any mad scientist you want. Dr. Pretorius.
Well,
all of that was true.
They're like, make something up, and I'm like, okay, Dr. Pretorius. As long as we're making stuff up, just why?
Can we get back on task here?
Well,
no, exactly. Sorry.
Anyway,
you're now what do you call it? Looping yourself.
Yes. All right. Okay. So Wesley has just stabbed because it's almost heartbreaking, and this is the most zombie-like that Jessica ever gets because she's inside that gate and trying to leave to make the pilgrimage out, near the water, out through the sugarcane and everything, and she's just kind of stepping, and they don't show it, but you get the impression she's just kind of banging her head on the gate, trying to be let out.
Yeah, not quite banging her head on the gate, just waiting there.
Yeah, and when Wesley, who loves her, finally goes out and opens the gate, she goes straight through. So then he stabs her with, as Drew pointed out, a mystical arrow, and then he picks her up and he wades into the water to drown himself. And that's really the end of the film, is that the local people who work the plantation find their bodies while they're fishing for their own dinner. They find their bodies and bring them back to the plantation. So
it's kind of funny to me how quickly this wraps up, because this movie wraps up right when you feel like it's, you know, I guess part of that is just the difference in the way films are paced. Although if you compare it to Universal horror film, they packed a lot into their, you know, hour or more running time. This movie really, to me, feels like it wraps up too quickly. That's like one of my other issues. Like, I wish they could have, like, I don't know what you could have cut, but I wish they would cut a little bit more, so maybe we could have had, like, more of the subplot with the mom and more of the stuff with the voodoo cult and, you know, like, more of that, you know. And maybe that's just, like, the monster movie nut in me. I want to see that stuff, you know. But
the movie's only 70 minutes long. I mean, Drew, this movie, even like a basic 90-minute film that we would expect now from a lightweight film, this movie is still 20 minutes shorter than that. So you don't even have to cut stuff. There's plenty of room to be adding more scenes and more payoffs.
Well, I would like to know if they actually cut any scenes from this.
I couldn't tell you. They may have cut something from the script as well, you know. I mean, the wild thing, like I say, they have a line early on, this whole thing, it's very dangerous for the crops to be this dry. That's got to mean something, man. Doesn't that mean to you?
Well, there's a whole business with the dark, you know, they have the dark little things pinned to to their clothes, and the nurse loses her, and nothing really, that's very ominous, but nothing really happens.
And nothing happens, yeah. So I don't know.
So there's some stuff that frustrates me about this movie, even though I think it's a good movie overall.
Yeah, no, I suppose, but to me the good thing is that only errs in the direction of being too short, as far as that goes. So yeah, in fact, we should get some final thoughts on this. We'll go in the same order. It was Joya, Drew, Tony, and then I'll go. Joya, what are your final thoughts on I Walked with a Zombie?
I mean, I think we've hit on most of it. It's interesting to see the themes in all the relationships. I think this is it's kind of, I mean, especially given that it's 1943, I feel like it's pretty non-traditional as far as how brazenly it just dives into the race issues and the sort of, I wouldn't necessarily say the gender norm issues, because that's pretty, you know, she's a nurse or whatever, but just some of that, you know, like, she does challenge them, and I don't know, it's interesting, and interesting that way. And then I liked the themes, I liked the music, I liked the voodoo stuff. It's always very interesting to me. I love the dancing that they do out in the woods. And I think that's it. Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Drew, what are your final thoughts?
I like this movie a lot. I even though I'm being, I guess, a little more critical of it than you know, well, I guess Tony and I seem to be on the same page, but you and Julie are. It's not as much. I adore White Zombie. This is probably a better made movie than White Zombie in many respects, but it just doesn't resonate with me in the same way. That being said, it's a very important film, and you know, it is a film I enjoy. So I'm glad that we've revisited it. I'm definitely excited for where we're going with this series of films.
I'm really excited as well. Tony, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I like the movie. I don't know. Drew pretty much summed up my feeling as well. There's a lot of great bits. It's really cool. I like this era of filmmaking. I like Val Lewton a lot. I think there's some great shots the Voodoo stuff is awesome, but it doesn't quite gel as well as the previous movie for me. But yeah, I dig it. I think it's worth checking out. I think it's really cool that now we can actually do that as opposed to, before when you'd have to just hope for some kind of bootleg or just kind of dig it up. But now you can see it on multiple platforms, and that's pretty awesome.
It's amazing. I can't believe the difference of how life has changed, that you can get a hold of these movies that by no means should be obscure, but I'm telling you, growing up in the 80s, you just couldn't just go out and find I Walked with a Zombie. Not if you were living, like I was, around Fort Hood in Texas.
I'm going to dispute that a little bit because my video store had it.
Did it really?
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's really impressive.
They had all of the black and white horror films. Or not all of them, literally, but they had a lot of them.
That's astonishing. No, not for me, my man. The only
I'm not saying it was easy. The guy that ran our video store wasn't just doing it for monetary like means. He really loved movies, so he made sure he had these.
I mean, the other place that you could get a hold of, really obscure stuff, would show up on, things like Commando USA's Groovy Movies, or the Phantom of the Opry, which was on TNN and showed a lot of the same, stuff. So a lot of old RKO pictures and weird imports from Mexico and what have you. That's just for me, that was what it was before the modern advent. I really love this movie. This is I reacted to this movie a lot better than White Zombie. I liked White Zombie a lot, but to me, this is a fantastic one. Next week's movie is not a fine film like this. This is truly a fine film. I love next week's movie. It's going to be a blast. But this one, to me, is just really beautiful. So I'm really happy that we got a chance to talk about it. Let's do endorsements. I guess we'll go in the same direction. Ms. Julia, I don't know what you got going on. What do you want to talk about?
Oh gosh, what do I have going on?
I mean, as far as things that you've had time to watch.
I know what you mean. What I've got going on, right? What I've got going on is decluttering, which is super exciting. I'm trying to think if I've seen or read anything that was really interesting of late, and I'm not. Nothing is coming to me. So if it does, you come back to me.
All right, very cool. Drew, what about you? You have anything to endorse this week?
I am plugging horrormovies.net because we finally have enough stuff on there where it is worth your time and effort to come by and read all our articles and reviews. And we're gonna have a lot more stuff. We're updating between 2 to 4 times a day, so we're gonna have more articles coming up this week. And I have just been named editor-in-chief of horrormovies.net. So I'm going to be captain of the ship, and I want to have a very diverse. I want to be able to discuss older movies like this movie that we did tonight, as well as 80s and 70s and more modern stuff. I want to have the most diverse horror genre website that I possibly can, because I feel like that is something that has benefited this podcast, and I think it is something that, you look at a lot of the other genre websites, and they kind of lean more toward, they somewhat seem to start at the 70s and never really seem to go much further back than that. I would like to break that mold a little bit and really just go nuts.
I'm so excited that you're leading that site. I think it's going to be really interesting as you start to bring on more content, and I'm looking forward to reading it. I'm looking forward to writing for it. I think it's going to be really neat. So, well,
I'm gratified that a lot of the, I've been posting a lot of the articles on the Facebook, and I'm very gratified that a lot of our regular listeners seem to be making the pilgrimage over there and reading, and they seem to be responding well to what we're doing. So, if you have something you'd like to see covered, post it on the Castle of Horror Facebook page because I'll be guaranteed to see it.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. Well, that was really cool. Tony, do you have anything to endorse for us?
I got a few things. Actually, so there's several Roku channels have turned up that I really dig. One's the Monster Channel, and it's just kind of a streaming, like, just whatever shows up is what's there, you know. It's kind of they call it like an interactive TV channel, but yeah, so you can put that on your Roku. That's awesome. Or if you go to monsterchannel.tv.
Are you kidding me? I'm going to do that right now.
There's also the Old Movie Network, which has a ton of stuff that is pretty cool, including some horror movies and just some random public domain kind of stuff that I've really enjoyed. Also, I subscribed to Night Flight because I wanted to give them my cash because I loved Night Flight. I didn't have cable when I was younger, so I had to just catch it whenever I was at friends' houses or whatever. So Night Flight was like a kind of a treat. They also, I'm trying to find the episodes where they did, they took a Sentai kind of, you know, we know it's kind of Power Rangers kind of show and redubbed it as Dynaman. That was amazing. That was super funny. So, yeah, those three channels. Also saw Hardcore Henry, which is a gimmick movie. You know, it's like watching, if you're a gamer and you've played Half-Life and you have those interactive cutscenes, it's like streaming the cutscenes from like Half-Life or something like that. Based on the director had done a music video with that kind of premise. And I really had fun with that movie. Like, I went kind of like, oh, I should check this out because friends of mine had checked it out and thought it was really cool. It's not for everyone, and especially people who are prone to motion sickness, I'm sure. But having played a lot of first-person shooter, like things like Far Cry 4 recently, I just felt like I was just back watching, observing a game like that. It's pretty cool.
This is the difference between you and me, Tony. Like, I saw the trailer for that, and I don't know, man. Like, I know Tim League is pushing it.
Hold up. So I know what you're saying where you're like, hey, it seems lazy, but it's not lazy if you – the premise is not to be lazy by not giving the character personality. The premise is if you liked Crank, this is your movie.
I liked Crank, but Crank still had a character. I don't know. Like, I don't want to piss in your Cheerios. So you can believe me or not. That's fine. I'm telling you that this movie was fun, and if you don't want to believe that it's fun and don't want to check it out, that's okay. I believe that. I feel like it depends on your idea of fun, which is like if you're a gamer,
like violence and action, and like if you like the stuff in Crank, this has it from a first-person perspective. I'm going to leave it at that. But I don't know. You saw Batman versus Superman, and I think that thing looks like just complete garbage.
Hey, touche. But
and maybe that movie looks like nothing I ever want to see ever. And I love comics, so there you go. But to add to that, there was actually a Philip Marlowe first-person movie called Lady in the Lake, which the Draft House showed the trailer for. I had no idea that existed. So if you want, you can go watch a detective do the same thing. Well,
Are you talking about the Humphrey Bogart movie?
It's called Lady in the Lake.
I think you're thinking
I can't remember the name of it, but there's a Humphrey Bogart movie where he's on the land.
Robert Montgomery.
Right. I didn't
dream up this movie. I'm
just
saying that Lady in the Lake is not Humphrey Bogart. The movie I'm talking about is not Humphrey Bogart.
I believe you on that. I'm stuck trying to remember the title of this movie now. That's going to keep me up tonight.
The movie you're thinking of is Dark Passage.
Thank you.
That's true.
That would have kept me up all night. I guarantee it.
Yeah, it's dark, but it's only like the first 8 or 9 minutes are in first person.
Yeah,
but
evidently people weren't really, like, critics didn't know, why would you make a whole movie where you see, and they had some interesting cuts in the trailer, actually, where you see him in the mirror and stuff like that. Of course, Philip Marlowe has, like, they don't give Henry a voice in this one at all. So, you know, in general, you're going to like that Philip Marlowe's doing Philip Marlowe things, because if you like the character. Whereas Henry is a total cipher. He is the camera, you know, for all intents and purposes throughout the movie. But I had a blast just because it's over the top ridiculous. Not as crazy as Crank 2, which is just total batshit insanity, but closer to the original Crank. And Sharlto Copley, Copley, is really great in this. Like, you have to have a character opposite of a cipher who could do a lot of different things, and he plays multiple characters, and his part is pretty awesome, I think. So, including one really cool scene that I don't want to spoil, but if it does end up being your bag, it's worth checking out.
Tell you what, Tony. I will make a deal with you right now. If and when this crops up on Netflix, I will watch the whole thing, and if I like it, I will publicly eat my words on this podcast.
I plan on watching. I will also then watch Batman vs. Superman on Netflix, or some other way that people.
Oh, I'm not gonna. I understand why people I do understand the divisiveness of Batman versus Superman. Like, I get that. Like, I'm not saying, like, I don't think that movie's great filmmaking by any stretch of the imagination. I just think it's better than critics are giving it.
That's possible. Like I said, if somebody gave me a ticket for free, I would go see it. But there's no way I'm giving somebody money to see that movie. That's me. I know I'm in the minority. I have friends who, actually I don't have any friends who love it. I just have friends who are like, it's not as bad as people say.
Well,
I've never seen anybody who loves that movie.
It's kind of where I'm at. Like, I don't think it's amazing filmmaking, but it has stuff in it that I thought was fun, and I actually legitimately did like when they do the Ben Affleck Batman movie, I will be on board for that, because I thought he was an excellent Batman.
No, that's everything I've heard, and that's the only part where I'm like, because everybody has said Affleck Batman is really good, and so
Affleck Batman is really good. Absolutely, yeah.
Hey, Jason's got my back.
Yeah, no.
Yeah,
I think that's the one thing that has, like, where I've been like, I could go
but
see
just
that
the
today.
Eisenberg Lex Luthor is terrible.
Oh,
I don't know. I didn't. What I think is funny is, I'm going to write an article for you, Drew, about the work of Jean Rollin, this French director that I really enjoy. And yet there's not a thing that Jean Rollin ever did in his very strange vision that ever, came anywhere near the production quality and the craftsmanship of a Batman versus Superman. And that's where it gets really complicated to do what we do.
Well,
because
I'm going to say something as a bitter Fantastic Four fan. The worst Batman movie and the worst Superman movie is still better than the best Fantastic Four movie.
That's a shame.
Undoubtedly.
I'm going to say, though, that the best Batman movie and the best Superman movie is not nearly as good as the best Iron Man and Captain America movie, and I cannot wait for Civil War. I'm so excited.
I'd still stack Batman Returns over Iron Man.
No way.
Yes
No
way.
No
Yes
way.
way.
I would rank Batman Returns higher. Batman 1989. I don't even remember how good it was.
Oh, I've seen prep.
John Favreau's Iron Man. Yeah. But okay. Wait, endorsements, or else we will never break through. My endorsement is Julia's going to roll her eyes so loudly you'll be able to hear it. Is Peyton Place, because I made Julia watch Peyton Place and Return to Peyton Place, which are two of my favorite films, all-time favorite, and she saw the scales fell from her eyes, and she was like, I get why you love this. That was how powerful that experience was, I love Peyton Place. If you haven't seen it, you need to go out and learn about the evils just under the surface of small-town America. Great stuff. This is wonderful. So,
Mia Farrow.
Mia Farrow is on the TV series, which we've also been watching because we've been digging deep into Peyton Place for reasons God only knows. This is probably working towards something that I'm going to write that'll somehow or another reference Peyton Place. Which is how it works. You get obsessed with something for a while, and then eventually you come out with a word.
And by you, he means he.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm not alone. No.
Yep.
So, all right. Wow, what a fun conversation. I loved talking about this movie. Next week we are back with another zombie origins picture, something just about 14 years after this one. We are slowly working our way up to the launch of the modern zombie era. So next week we have a zombie origins picture from the swinging...
We're slowly lurching, crawling, dragging 1 foot behind, shambling. There you go, shambling.
Yes. We're going to have at least one movie in this series that'll be in color, and we're going to have at least one movie in every decade up until 1968. So it's going to be good. All right. Thanks, everybody. If you are a listener to the show, leave us a review. That really, really matters. Tell your friends. Bring them along. Have them listen to the show. Like us on Facebook. Leave comments. We will totally engage. We are so happy that you guys are...
Tell me I'm an asshole for dissing Hardcore Henry.
Absolutely.
No, I would never do that.
Not you, Tony. Not you, Tony. Listeners at home. I know you wouldn't do that.
I think I'm probably, actually, to be honest with you, knowing most people, I'm probably in the minority in this. But I have fun.
I am willing to give anything a chance. At least I saw Batman and Robin 3 times. So I'm pretty. I got pretty Teflon skin as far as the movie is concerned. So
Alfred. Yeah.
And I'm perfectly willing to admit when I'm wrong. So there we go. Bam.
I liked seeing George Clooney say goodbye to Michael Gwynn and all that. There was
Michael Gwynn.
Yeah, wasn't Michael Gwynn the guy?
Michael Goff.
Michael Goff. I'm so sorry. Oh,
for
Jason.
Shame, Jason.
Thinking about Fred Gwynn. I'm so sorry. Yeah.
You're getting your elderly British actors confused with Herman Munster.
Stuff happens.
Anyway. Well, wait a minute.
When you don't refill your coffee first.
No, hang on. I'm not hanging up yet. Michael Gwynn. There is a Michael Gwynn, and who is he? He's the guy who played the monster in one of the Frankenstein pictures. Revenge of Frankenstein with Michael Gwynn. That's the problem. I'm so sorry.
You're getting your Hammer actors confused.
I'm getting my Hammer actors mixed up.
A purely Jason-esque problem, if there ever was one.
Yes.
That is the realm of Jason.
The quintessential
I
Jason
cannot
dilemma.
keep track of all these Hammer actors. That's awesome.
All right. Well, anyway, thank you, everybody, and I appreciate you guys being on, and to the cast, thank you so much. We will talk to you next week. Bye.
Bye.
See you.
Night.